Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to go over all of the books that I read in September. Okay, so today I'm going to go over the 11 books that I read in September and 3 DNFs. I'll go ahead and start with the DNFs that I have and then work my way up by star ratings. So the first 3 books that I DNF'd this month was Phantasma, I think is what it's called. I will put up pictures. Most of these are going to be pictures because I read a lot on my Kindle this month. I didn't get very far in this. I only got to chapter 2, so I really can't say a lot about it, but it's definitely not a type of book that I would read. Lots of demonic and conjuring of the dead and stuff, and so for me that's just not my type of book, and I DNF'd that on chapter 2. So the next book that I DNF'd was unfortunately Fable, and this is one of the books that you heard me talk about in the Survive the Night Readathon, which I will link below, and I will go much more in depth in that. But I think I got to about 30% or so in DNF this one. I feel like she was just using way too many descriptions in this book, and there was still nothing really going on. To me, it was just not good writing, and at that time I was just getting book after book after book that was disappointing to me, and so I was just in no mood to try to finish this, so I DNF'd it. Then the next DNF that I had was The Act of Disappearing. This is an arc that I received from NetGalley, and it is already out. I had high hopes for this because it does have great ratings on Goodreads. I'll put the rating right here for that. But it wasn't what I expected. It is following a author, and she's basically working at a bar one night, and this photographer approaches her and he's like, hey, I have this picture that I would really like you to write a story about. I've read your book and I really like it, and so the premise sounded interesting, and it goes from past and present, so basically it's the past of the person in that picture, and it was the past that really was just, I was not following, I was bored, the characters I didn't care about, I felt like it was really slow. The present one was much more interesting, the present perspective with her was much more interesting, but I feel like there wasn't enough of it and there wasn't enough going on to keep my interest. I really don't feel there was any backstory on these characters, not the past one, but the present one, there's not really any backstory on her, so I don't really feel immediately drawn in and why I should care about this character. So I think I DNF'd around 20 or 30%. And I was listening through audio. The audio is not bad, it's just sadly it wasn't holding my attention. So the next book that I will talk about is in the 2-star, and that would be the the new release by Laura Dave, The Night We Lost Him. I am very disappointed in this, guys. I'm very, very, very disappointed in this one. I loved Laura Dave, The Last Thing He Told Me. Loved that book, and so I saw this come out and was so excited about it, but it fell flat. There was nothing happening in this book. I did finish it. I still don't feel that really anything happened in the entire book. It's not even worth your time, in my opinion. So I gave this 2 stars, and this is basically following, I believe it's the daughter, Nora, and she is trying to figure out what happened to her dad, and he fell off the edge, and she's trying to figure out if he was pushed or if he jumped or what happened, and it's following her the entire time, talking to his coworkers and his friends and other people in his life and trying to figure out what exactly happened. And I just didn't think this book was, I mean, there was just not anything happening in this book. So then I will go over my 3 stars, and my 3-star, the only 3-star I have is My Vampire as a Roommate. I did really enjoy this. It is funny. I gave it 3 stars just because I don't think it's a favorite. Like, it was good, not great, which is the typical definition of my 3 stars. It was okay. It was just okay. Anyways, it's following Cassie, who follows a Craigslist ad, and There's a guy that's offering up a room for $200 a month, which is sketchy. And she goes and meets him and decides to rent this room, and come to find out this roommate is a vampire. It is funny, it is light, it is perfect for Halloween. I think I had a little bit higher hopes in it though, and my problem with this book was just it felt a little disjointed to me. It was funny and light, and I love that part of it, and then it tried to throw in some serious elements which I just didn't feel like really fit with the story. It kind of took me away from it, and it was resolved super fast, and it was just kind of like, it felt like it was just thrown in there just to have conflict. And I just didn't think it really fit in the book, and it kind of took away from it. So I think that she should have just picked to stay light and funny, or to have a more serious book. I didn't feel like the conflict that happened in this book really made a lot of sense. And it just took away from it. So for that reason, I decided to give it a 3-star. The next book that I read was for Jordan Elaine's book club, and that was Assistant to the Villain. This is following Evie and the villain, and it is super funny. It is a book that I would go into not taking it seriously and expecting it to be really silly. If you like The Office, I have heard it is compared to The Office meets fantasy. It gave me Princess and the Frog vibes, and it was just a good time. I really enjoyed it. I do not recommend the audio. The audio is terrible in my opinion, and it really took away from my experience, and I think that's the only reason I rated it a 3.5. If I hadn't used the audio at all, I think I would have had way more enjoyment and possibly have rated it a 4-star. But from what I did read physically, I was really enjoying it, and I did think it was super funny. And I don't even like The Office, I know. Don't come at me, I don't even like The Office, but I did really think this was a fun time. I highly recommend it. Basically, she gets a job with the villain, and it follows their banter and just all the random trials and problems that they come across throughout this whole thing. And there is a little bit of romance, very, very light, so it's just a good time. Perfect palate cleanser. And then the next book that I rated 3.5 is Up From Dusk. This is my first biblical fiction. I have read a lot of historical fiction that's like Christian and romance and stuff, but not like based on the Bible. And so this was my first biblical fiction, and it was based on the story of Martha. I didn't love this one. I think just because the first 10 or 12 chapters, I really was not attached or felt like that emotional pull that I feel like you should feel in a biblical fiction. I felt like the character just wasn't drawing me in the story, and I didn't feel any of the emotions that I think I should have felt when she was going through all that stuff. But in part 2 is when I really started to enjoy it, and that is when Jesus comes in, and I did really love the second half of that. So for those reasons, I gave it a 3.5. This is obviously fiction, so it's a lot of speculation and adding what she thinks could have happened with Martha as she grew up. So obviously not reality, but the parts with Jesus were a lot of based off the Bible. So it was great, and I did enjoy the second part, but definitely not a favorite of mine. And then I'm gonna actually skip this one real quick because it's the second in a series, and I'll talk about the first in the series. And that is The Trial of the Sun Queen and The Rule of the Aurora King. So The Trial of the Sun Queen was actually the book club pick for Spark of Sam's book club, and I have all of that linked below. And then I immediately went into The Rule of the Aurora King because I enjoyed it so much. And so The Rule of the Aurora King is what I gave a 3.5, and then we'll get into my 4 stars, and that would be The Trial of the Sun Queen, which is the first book. And this is following a prisoner who ends up being kidnapped by a kingdom, and then has to enter these trials in order to win the place of being queen with the Sun King. And it definitely reminds me of The Selection meets Tog meets ACOTAR meets Fourth Wing. There were lots of books in here that it reminded me of. I think that it was such a fun time. I really enjoyed it. I flew through it. Yes, it was definitely cheesy and predictable, but if you go into it just for the sake of having a fun time, it's definitely so much fun and reminds me of like just a popcorn type fantasy, and I really did enjoy it. There were elements in it that I did not like and did not want in there at all. There were just a few spy scenes that were just not okay with me, and so that's why I couldn't give it a 5-star. And also because I don't think that it's, you know, the most amazing fantasy I've read, but it was a really great time. And so I gave that a 4-star. And then the second one I gave a 3.5-star. I can't talk much about it because obviously that will spoil things. I gave it a 3.5 because I felt like there was just a lot of circling around and around and around, and it became a little repetitive. But I did love the characters so much more in this one, and I did think the storyline was so much better. I do think that if you don't love the first one, you possibly would love the second one, but there is a good amount of spice in it, so go into it knowing that. But my problem with it was just that the issues that they were going through just kept happening over and over and over. And so that was just really frustrating to me, and it became monotonous, and then I was just kind of getting bored. So that is why I gave it a 3.5, but I will be continuing. And then the rest of my 4 stars would be A Sorceress Comes to Call, which I borrowed from the library, so I do not have this in a physical copy. And this is for Liv's Patreon. I really enjoyed this. I buddy read this with my sister, and it is a grim retelling fairy tale. So there are a lot of fairy tales written back in the day, grim fairy tales, and I think it was the one called A Goose Girl. I will put up a picture if I can find it, and this is a retelling of that fairy tale. So it is definitely like a classic in a way, and it is gothic, and it is dark, and it's a little slower and different, but not in a bad way. When I went in, this is not how I expected this story to go, but it was actually really good. And there were some elements that were a little weird, but it was just fun. I don't know, it was just interesting. It's definitely something that I think is perfect for October. So her mother is a sorceress, and she is hurting everyone in her life, and so she then goes about trying to figure out how to stop her mother from hurting any more people in her life. And that is all I can really tell you without giving away spoilers. It was a really good fairy tale. And then the next book that I read was Cherry Pie or Die, and I love this book. I will link the discussion for this book to Hannah's channel below if you have read the book and you're interested in that. It was such a good time. I loved this cozy. I loved this cozy. It was so different from cozies that I've read, and I think that's why I really enjoyed it. It had a lot of historical elements in the setting and just the different items and stuff that were in it. I really enjoyed that it was an Airbnb, and there was not a lot of emphasis on cherry pie, funny enough, because that's what it's called, so go into it knowing that. But it didn't bother me because I just enjoyed everything else so much. There's a character in it that's grouchy named Oscar, and I absolutely loved him. It was just so much fun. Such a fast read. I believe it's around 200 pages, and it is on KU as well as all of the ones in the series, so I will definitely be continuing this month in the second one with Cookies and Scream. And basically she goes and starts working for her grandma's best friend that she considers to be an aunt, and she gives tours to this historical place, and then of course a murder happens. The murder happens very quickly, and the rest of the time they're trying to figure it out. Has lots of clue elements. I highly recommend this one. Such a quick read, such a fun time. It is very simple, but I think that's why I really loved it. It was just such a great palate cleanser. So then the next one that I read was another ARC, and this is Society of Lies. I will put the date that this is coming out below. I think it's coming this month. And I actually really enjoyed this one. I at first wasn't sure if I was gonna like it, but as you get into it, you really start to unfold what's going on. There's a lot to unpack in this story. It takes a lot of you actually paying attention to really understand and get into it. It's not one that you can just rush through, but I did end up really loving this. This is following a couple different perspectives of present and past. One is the sister who passed away, and the future perspective is the sister who is trying to figure out what happened to her. And it happens at, I believe it's Princeton University, and there is like a secret society club, and she thinks she's murdered, and she's trying to uncover what happened to her younger sister. And so it follows the past perspective of her going through college in the same secret society club and her sister going through it. And then they kind of are like running along, and you're uncovering clues as it goes to try and figure out what happened. There's a lot of rich drama. I thought it was a really well thought out book, and I believe it was her debut, so a great debut novel. I gave that 4 stars. And then the last 4-star that I had of the month was Not Another Love Song. This was another arc, and this book is already out, is a new release. And it is following a violinist and a celloist as they fall in love. It is super good. I think it was a little bit more literary, but I just really enjoyed it. I thought that it was just a beautiful and different romance. There is quite a bit of spice in it, so definitely don't read it if you do not want that in there. The audio was really great. I actually preferred the audio, so I highly recommend using that. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it, and so I got quite a few arcs done this month, and I was really excited about that. So then, the last and only 5-star I had of the month would be, drumroll please, Heat of the Everflame. And is anyone surprised? No, no one's surprised. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you know I've been loving every minute of this series, and let me tell you, it just gets better and better and better and better and better, and it is just so good. It is so good. It's so fast-paced. It constantly leaves you on cliffhangers. You will fly through these huge books. This one was around 800 or so pages. It's all through KU, and I flew through it. She's constantly leaving you on cliffhangers, and so you just can't put it down. And I am dying for the 4th book to come out. I'm dying. Like, I can't believe I have to wait until next year for this book to come out. It is, it hurts my soul. So I highly recommend the series. I can't talk at all about this 3rd one without giving stuff away. So if you want to know more about this series and you want to hear about the premise of it, I will link the video below where I talk about Spark of the Everflame, which is the 1st one. But until next time, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I am very proud of myself for getting 11 books done, even though there were some other ones that were DNF'S. It's getting them off my TBR shelf. I got all my book clubs done, and I feel like I just had a really fun month with the readathons and everything going on. October is even more packed than this month, so we will be seeing lots of book clubs coming up. So until next time, remember to read what inspires you, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, friends.